Hey, this is Nick from Remedy667.com, and today is Horror Font Friday, and we're taking a look at Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, but not the James Whale cut. We're looking at the Castle Films. I think this is 8mm, Super 8mm version. Look at that delicious lettering here. I've already got it set up in Illustrator. You know, I love making fonts from the word Frankenstein, and there's so many different versions of it out there. I actually have this interesting book that has a cool version of it, so maybe I'll do that one next week or something. Yeah, let's get started. 1 minute in. Okay, we're gonna try and go fast. I know I say that every week, but you know, I don't know how long I could watch long videos. Actually, I could definitely watch long videos of people making fonts, but sometimes I babble. Today we're watching Frankenstein in the background. If you hear people hollering and yelling, the original Universal Frankenstein is what we got going on. There is an F in Frankenstein, and look, it looks like they employed a similar technique with their drawing of the letters. We get an I, we get a lot of N's, we get a K, we get a RST. And you know, having the RST might be what's so important about using the Frankenstein. There's just something about this word. It has a lot of what we need. Like AEFIKNRST. Like that's, you know, RST. It doesn't have an L, but RSTLN. You know, it's got the Wheel of Fortune letters. Got some orange juice to try and fight off any sickness these days. It's actually orange juice with other crap. Probably pineapple or something, or peach. So this is always fun with this. I'm gonna start with this S. Normally this is, you know, if you've seen me make S's a lot, I make them from C's, and they kind of work like this, but in reverse. Group that, and that C is going to help us build out our D, our O, our Q. So that's a good one to get kind of out of the way nice and early. You also notice this S, it doesn't really have the curve, so the C doesn't have the curve. It's more like an E minus a middle part there, and we actually have two E's, which is kind of nice. Gotta love Frankenstein, the gifts it gives, which helps us with building our L and getting us an L that has a little bit more variation from the E normally does. And because there's so many N's, we can build out M's, V's, M's, X's, Y's, things like that will come out of N's, and having a few to choose from is nice because it just is. No, it's nice because it gives us a little bit more variation. Same with anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and take one of those ends and bend it out about that much and expand it a little bit. And I'm going to take this one and bend it the other direction and expand it a little bit. Same way. Maybe not that much. There. So I always hit V to go back. V. I don't know if anybody ever plays around in InDesign laying out your multi-page documents. If you got any quick tips to not have a bunch of loose V's all over your documents? Every time when we always like obviously go through and catch them in editing, but my boss is like, I don't know how a V got there. I'm like, it's the keyboard shortcut to turn on the cursor. I've been doing design for a long time, and I still just make mistake after mistake. Like a terrible Frankenstein. I'm going to make my H real quick while I've got this F right here and this N. And I really like this. It's almost like a drip, but it's not really a drip. And actually, in this one, this is kind of a nice weird shapes going on in it. Now, you wonder, it's kind of weird, like how to go with the H, because we've got the crossbar and the A is really low, but that's because this. You notice that the F and the E crossbar is the same height, and normally when I talk about this, I talk about in the F you want it to go down a little bit just to even out this negative space, but because they've already set up that as the rule of keeping it at like that X height and everything rides at that X height, we're going to go ahead and move this up in the H, which I think looks a little weird, but I think it's going to follow the rule that we've set. Or like, I don't know, if you watch like a Lego brick document, everything has to fit with the brick, you know, so you set up this style when you're developing a typeface, and that is an important thing to stick with, the system, the type system that you're building. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but in this sense, but I feel like it's important, and I think it'll work. And now I need a J. Which seems weird to keep a human heart beating for 3 weeks. No, it seems weird to do this as the J. It's almost just like a backwards L. But like I said, it follows this system. If you think you got the bottom of the S, you know, that hoop, I guess it'd be like that. Holy shit. It's weird. It's backwards. Even though it looks like a backwards L, that's because also we're following the system. So just remember, everything we're doing for the system. You know, like to keep and that also means that the G, the crossbar that lives in the G, is also going to ride that high up, which I'm just going to quit complaining about it because it's the system. And I think ultimately, once it's finished, it's going to make a lot of sense. Now, I didn't flip that, but for some reason, it looks like this angle is going the wrong way. So I'm going to twist it. This is like a hack, I guess. I don't know. A sloppy way of working. Probably a better word for that, but just make that incline just a little bit better. And then I'm going to go in and do some adjustments here, because this is very much like the sea. Granted, it did come from the sea, chicken of the sea, but there, that will vary it a little bit from the sea, and it's not going to look as much like it came right from there. And that was really weird for me to do the J that early on. All right, Nick, shut up. Get back to work. All right, let's take our H and our J, and that's going to build us our U. Sounds like somebody's making a monster. You hear that thunderstorm? Holy moly. Now, notice a couple things here. This one's definitely a little bit thinner, so I'm going to stretch it out just a tiny bit, and I'm going to move it to the left just a little bit, just to give us a little bit more space in the middle. I might be breaking the system. I think that was edited in the theatrical version. But it may break the system, but I feel like it helps just give it a little bit more space and feel. I thought I accidentally moved the T, but apparently not. That's what I was doing there with my clicking and moving. All right, let's get a V going with this A and this N. So the reason I'm bringing an N into it is because when I rotate this A, it dropped below the base line. Whatever, that's not important. The important thing is, if you notice, the drips are now going up, and I have no drips going down. So, whoops, I'm gonna cut this first and clean up this A so that it is a V. And then I'm going to take parts from this N. So I'm going to cut there and cut there. And just kind of wiggling these in. I'm actually going to save these two for later, because those are going to make perfect periods. So and there you go. Now we're going to do the same thing, old school style, tilting the N and tilting the V a little bit in, just a tiny bit. So this is all uneven. I'm going to delete that. So this sits a little high, which is interesting. What I'm going to do is cut there and cut there. And I'm going to bring this so that it moves out a little bit. You can also see this should be a little thinner. There we go. And that might be a little too smooth for some of the rest of these letters, but I think it works. It is a little wide, but I also feel like this side of the V needs to be a little wider, which is weird. To at one point say, oh, it's too wide, and then be like, oh, this side needs to be wider. But group, I'm going to shrink it a little bit, which is good that we widened it. So now it kind of looks a little more even. It also makes that V look a little too thin on the left, but I think that works. If you look at letters like the N, they're kind of unbalanced. Part of the system. So let's make our Y and Z real quick. Now, I feel like the Y you would think should sit at the baseline, but I think I'm going to make it really low, kind of more like the crossbar in the A. Group, and this N is going to become the Z, obviously. What else have we forgotten earlier in the font? We need a B, a D, and we don't have any O's at all? All right. Now also think about earlier. That P is going to ride really high like that because of the sorry, I like I do this all the time. I'll start talking and then I kind of trail off. The P is going to ride really high because the crossbars are kind of in the middle and set high, even though the R's, that same thing with the E and the F, the P and the R are experiencing the same thing. We're at 18 minutes, so let's get going a little faster. Our B, I'm going to make from the P and the E. So that sorry, I want those to land right around there. So that is pretty good. I'm gonna move this one up a little bit to there. And I feel like that actually makes the B pretty well. I want this to come in. We're going to use this B to make our D. I feel like our O is pretty much going to look like a square. Whoops. Did that not cut through? Sorry. So our D and our O's are actually going to end up looking very similar because of this system. And actually, I feel like the D might even look more like an O. So I had to turn that side down a little bit. And actually, I'm going to get this side a little lower. Just to accentuate the fact that this is a D. I can't get too low, though, because I feel like it falls out of looking too normal. But I think that that kind of helps you know that it's a D. All right. Shoot it, it's a monster. I want this side of the D to reflect the C. I'm just going to cut it right there. And this side, I'm going to cut it right there. And then that will become our O. I think I may have too many points in this document. In the P, another thing that's going to happen is that stick out there is going to go away. In making the Q, I want it to go all the way up into the R. Down like that. And actually some of these that happened in the C, we're going to bring them up. Yeah. When I get a lot of points in the document, I get maybe this version Illustrator, when I'm doing that, the pixels go gray. I want to say that if I zoom in or out, it'll fix itself, but I just re-click on it. And we're doing the K's back to back to make our X. Whoops. And because these are obviously all from the same side and letter, there's so much duplication happening in here that is very obvious. So we're just going to clean some of these up. Not even necessarily in the cleanest of ways. But notice, so group that. You know what? I feel like leaving it thin like that works. All right, let's make some letters really quick. Numbers, I mean. 1. These are going to be a little tricky to make, I feel like, because of a few things. We're going to do our new trick. Is this an S? All right, that's all of it. So I want that to be solid. I feel like that's just going to help a little bit. We're not going to talk very much because we're trying to do this quickly. Group. To differentiate this from the eye, I'm going to solidify the middle part of it there, the bottom part, whatever you want to call it. I'm still kind of, in my mind, as I'm doing the two, I'm kind of trying to process how the 6 and the 9 are going to work, because I'm still not totally sold on them. Whoa! My mouse bumped into something on the table. I think that's the doorbell, probably sending me an email complaining about how cold it is outside. It likes to do that. All right, here we are, moment of truth. Should we skip to the 7 first? The 8's also going to be a little tricky. So I think one thing we can think about with the 6 that will make it easier is if we combine this, we're essentially just lowering this to the halfway point, like it were the E. This is the best I could come up with. Just kidding. But this was what I came up with. So, is it zooming out? Yeah, zooming out completes that the way it's supposed to be. Reflect the 9, and the 9 is going to have the same right there along that centralized line. Cuts there. All right, well, I think those came out pretty good. All right, I'm going to tilt this S a little bit to make my 8, which is going to be a little iffy. This is getting so bad. Look at that 8. I don't even know. All right. So first things first, that's got to go. This has to come out a little bit. That wiggles in. This weird thing going on at the top, it doesn't need to do that. I feel like that's a much better 8 now. This needs to definitely come up a little bit. Sorry, the light change. I accidentally did a keyboard command that closed every other window. The 8 still feels a little off, but it doesn't feel angled. It feels like the internal circles are just a little wrong. So let's do this. Move this one over to the left a bit and a little bit bigger. I think it's because those two are off a little as well, but I feel like that actually works for some reason. All right, so there you have it. Numbers, letters from the Castle Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein's Castle, the Castle films. The original Frankenstein, the man-created monster with Boris Karloff and Colin Clive. So nowadays you have these fancy DVDs and stuff. Imagine back in the day you had a Super 8 film. If you wanted to watch Frankenstein at your house, that was the way to do it. Be thankful for what you have. So here we go. There's our alphabet. Looks pretty good. The M on the left looks like it could thicken up a little bit, but when you look at it next to that N, it totally makes perfect sense. The R, that point on it is so weird. So weird. On the S, you can see the bottom, how it kicks out a little bit on the left. That actually makes sense in some of the issues that we were running into with the 8. But I didn't really think about it much at the time. I really like this T, that crooked bar going down the middle of it. The V and W also look a little thin. X, it looks like I got a little thin near the end of the alphabet. And we knew that with some of the characters, but looking at it compared to some of the earlier characters like the R, that, you know, like when we're a little more zoomed out, like going from this to this, like those are going to need probably a little bit of love. 0, 1, 2, 3. That 3 actually came out really good. 4, the 5 came out. These all came out really cool. And I actually like the lopsidedness of the 8. I think I'm going to make it a little taller though. I like the lopsidedness of the 8. I think it adds to the whole Frankenstein theme of everything. That's great. Thanks for hanging out. This was Horrorthon Friday. And I'm Nick from Remedy667.com. Go check us out. We're on the internet. And we will see you next week for Horrorthon Friday. Bye.